So, welcome everybody. Today we're going to be talking with Deirdre from Keenan Yarns. Gosh, we met Deirdre a long time ago when we were her local yarn store and when she lived in Illinois. And it was
Yes.
such a commute from where she is now. And so we've done all sorts of really fun collaborations with Deirdre. We did the hometown shawl kit a while ago that's based on our underground walkway that goes under the train. It's all painted with this really cool mural. And Deirdre just went, yeah, crazy. And it was fabulous, phenomenal. We did, a couple of years ago, we did Box of Light. She did all the colors for the Box of Light, which were beautiful. And we've got her yarn in the store, so we're just happy to get kind of the behind the scenes scoop, and learn a little more bit more about her and her company and her yarns. So, Deirdre, why don't you start by just introducing yourself and kind of how you got into this?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Deirdre Darr, and I'm originally from Chicago. But as I say, I'm a reluctant Youper. I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan now, where winter lasts for like 6 months, and we have about 2.5 feet of snow on the ground, and it's pouring rain today. So high spring. And I think it's going to get cold again, though. So it's that time of the year where it's all fluctuating. But I was knitting for 20 years before I started dyeing. And I just want to give a shout out to String Theory because I was um, pregnant with our second, and I bought the yarn for his baby blanket at String Theory. And I never actually pieced things together. So I came in for the Sunday, I think it was like Sunday afternoons, like you could just pay to come in and get some help. And I did that and like learned how to piece properly. And so, yeah, I always have like really warm, happy feelings about String Theory. So I started dyeing after we moved to the Upper Peninsula, and I was doing kind of knit commission stuff, and I was trying to get into designing. And I wanted this particular color purple for a project for a friend, and I just couldn't find it. And I thought, how hard would it be to dye yarn? Because like my friend from Belfast, Northern Ireland, had come to visit us at New Year's, and she had shown my son how to do natural dyes with tie dye. And then my son wanted to actually like create this little tie dye business and come with me to where I was selling my commission knits and hand knits. Anyway, I just tried it out. I thought it was just going to be for me and friends, and I bought like the primary colors of dye and maybe a purple. And a friend came over one day, and like, it was the first time I'd actually like created my own color instead of just doing like, oh, solid blue, oh, solid pink. Um, and she was like, you need to sell this. I was like, shut up, I do not. She's like, no, seriously, you need to sell this. Like, bring it to the farmers market, just even if it's just a small part of your table. So I was like, okay. So I came up with a few colors and had it out on the table in that first week. And I have to say, my husband's a teacher. I was a stay-at-home mom. Like money was so tight, and so the thought of even just spending $100 on a box of like 10 skeins was crazy. And so I have my 10 skeins or whatever, and some of them sold. Like I sold enough to buy another box of yarn, and I was like, okay, I guess this is going to happen. And so it just started from there. And now, like almost 7 years later, I'm in shops, like 25, 26 shops across the country now, and going to some of the really big shows. Like I did Vogue Knitting Live last month. I'm getting ready to go to Nashville next week for the Modern Daily Knitting Nash Yarn Fest for their inaugural yarn festival. So it's kind of crazy, this business that started out as a way to make a little extra money as a stay-at-home mom has like really turned into a fully fledged business.
For sure. And in 7 years, that's quick.
Yeah, and well, like we had a worldwide pandemic in there, which
Yeah, right.
like really tampered down sales. And then actually like one of the nice things about the business is that I've always been home then for my kids when they get home from school, or if they get sick, I'm here. But then also a couple of years ago, my dad was dying, so my folks moved in with us so that I could help take care of him. So it's really been um, just an amazing business to have that I can kind of go with where my life is at, like the stage of life I'm at. So it's been wonderful.
Yeah, I think that that is something that I love about supporting the hand dyers that we have at our store, because most of them are, micro businesses, right? And they're a lot, I would say almost all are doing it as a way for income and creative outlet and able to balance all the family obligations that fall to women. And so
Yeah.
I just think that's so cool that in addition to, when we buy and get beautiful yarn, that we're also able to allow women the flexibility to be creative and earn money, and grow and develop and all of those things that come with running a business and balance everything that needs to go on because a lot of jobs are not that flexible.
Well, and I like even just products, like people buying directly from me or buying my yarn from you or really any indie dyer, like you are supporting a family when you do that. So there is a direct impact from the purchase to a real family or a real person, at the, like, just one step away. Like,
Yeah.
you're the person who buys the yarn from me, and it really makes a difference to our family. So I mean, it's a really amazing thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just fun to get to know people too. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like when I see your yarn on the shelf, I think about you and, our conversations and the last thing we did together and what we're doing next together and all of that. Um, I know the names of the people who put the yarn on our shelves. And I just think
Yeah.
that is cool. And that's why I love that you agreed to do this interview too, because then the customers get to know, and they'll see it and they'll remember your face and your stories and all of that. And it's just that connection I think is so important in the world
Yeah.
right now. And it's fun. And it's
Yeah.
fun. So where do you get your color names? I know part of this story, but yeah, tell us all.
So when I was getting started, first off, I went to school for ministry. So I have an undergrad from DePaul in religious studies, and then I have my master's in divinity from a school in St. Louis. So I did not study business. I was not an art major, wasn't a chemist. So I had to like learn all this stuff really, really fast. And at the end of the day, I think like after I'd made a few colors, I realized, oh gosh, I have to come up with names for these. Like there is no creative brain cells left. And like my youngest was only like 18 months, I think, when I started the business. So yeah, there was nothing left. So I was driving in the car, and my favorite, I'll explain who my favorite band is, but like their song came on, and I was like, oh, if I were to dye a color like this, I think you would do it this way. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to name these colors after song names. So that's how I started. And my favorite band is Aha, which is the Norwegian band, which most Americans know them for Take on Me, which is going to be 40 years old this year, which is so horrific to think about. So a lot of my colors have their names, their song names. But then like, like there's one that's called If It's Not Scottish, It's Crap, which is named after Mike Myers' skit. And some of them are just like mom inspired. Like there's a chocolate colored one that's called Mommy Needs Chocolate. I recently just did a Pride and Prejudice collection, which we'll talk about one of the colors in there in a bit. So like sometimes it's just, it's funny things or it's song titles or it's book related. Like I grab them from all over because like sometimes my kids name them because I'm like, okay, mom has nothing left. What do you call this?
Well, I'll never forget a lot of the song titles I don't know. But the one of your colors that I love is Raising Boys, and it's
Oh
what
yes,
blood and mud,
yes, blood and
grass
dirt.
stains or something. It's
Yeah,
like having raised boys. I felt that one. I
yeah,
really, but I know that you have a color that is a result of the last time, I think it was the last time we
yeah.
visited in Glen Ellen. So tell us about that.
Well, we were getting ready for, I think, the Meet the Dyer, and we had a break between setting up and everyone arriving. So we stepped across the street to a wine bar, and I had this sparkling rosé. I still have the picture somewhere on my phone of the name of it. I want to say it was Guggenheim, but I don't think that's right because I know that's a museum and maybe not a bottle of wine or a winemaker. But I took a picture of it and I told Jan, I'm like, I'm going to make a color like this. It took almost 2 years. So, like, I hold on to all the inspiration until I figure out the right thing. So, this one was released as part of my Pride and Prejudice collection. It's called Sweetness Itself after Jane Bennett, but it was really inspired by a glass of wine with Janet.
Yeah, we were sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, that is the prettiest color of wine like we had
Yeah.
ever
Oh my
seen."
gosh. It was
Um,
also a delightful glass of wine, too. So,
Yeah, so for anybody local, it was Cozy's that we went into right across the street. And yeah, I don't remember the name of the wine either. But you could ask for their prettiest sparkling rosé and see what you get. That would work. But yeah, really cool and a beautiful color. Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, very cool. And how about the name of your company? Tell us how you ended up being Keenan.
well, I originally started out as Fangirl Hand Dyed Yarn, and there's another company called Fangirl Fibers. And as I was getting bigger, we were starting to get confused. So I decided I was going to rebrand, which is always kind of a scary thing to do. And in talking, like I'm mentioning it to my husband, and it was at the time my folks were living here. And my mom said, well, why not Keenan? And Keenan is actually my daughter's name, and she was stillborn at term. She would have been 16 this year in August. So at first I was like, oh God, no, I can't do that. Because people will ask, where does the name come from? And then you'd be like, oh, it's my stillborn baby. And everybody's like, ugh. Which perhaps my favorite telling of this story was actually to Kristen at your shop. And she asked about my daughter, and I said, well, she was stillborn. Her response was "OF," and it was so funny because it was like so genuinely like she thought she'd like hurt my feelings or whatever, and I laughed so hard. So because I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I said too, like when I was going through it. So yeah, so originally we like after about a week of throwing out all these names and nothing was really jiving, my husband said, he's like, well, why not Keenan? He says, why don't you go with that? So we actually sat down with our sons and we had a conversation with them because it's their sister, and I didn't know how they would feel about it, and they loved it. And so kind of, I guess a bit reluctantly, I went along with it because I was trusting how they felt about it. And I remember it was about a year after the the rebrand that I was sitting back kind of thinking about it, and I realized like what an incredible gift it was, because like when you have a child who's stillborn, um, like there's no memories that other people have of that child except you and your husband and maybe what was happening during the pregnancy. And like you never see their name in the newspaper. They're never going to walk across a stage. There's never going to be a wedding. And so I realized that like for every day that last year, I had said her name almost every single day. And it was just it's just turned into a really lovely thing to be able to just carry on the name, but also just kind of like our feelings about her and all of that.
That is so cool. Yeah, really cool. And I'm glad that it turned out, that I mean that you have those unintended consequences.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And they're good unintended
Yeah, right,
consequences.
exactly,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because there's always, either or. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
really interesting that. And it makes so much sense. It makes it seems like probably, I don't know to you, but it's like, oh yeah, well, of course. But who would have guessed when you were doing
Right.
it? So
Yeah.
very cool. All right. One of the yarns that we have in the store right now is the BFL base,
Hmm.
and we have BFL fingering at the moment.
Okay.
I want you to tell us a little bit about BFL and how's that different from merino, and a lot from the dye standpoint. How does it take the dye differently?
Well, first, I just want to say I am obsessed with BFL. I love it so much, and it is amazing for garments because, especially like a DK BFL. Like merino is just it's so soft and drapey, but like when you put it in a garment, it can just kind of hang instead of drape. Whereas BFL, it's soft, but it's not quite as soft as merino. It just the loft of it is amazing, and it's a little bit toothier, so it just holds those stitches for garments beautifully. I think like with let me see if I can grab two very quickly. Here we go. So this is so these are the same color, but this is on superwash merino sock weight, and this is the BFL DK. So merino, when you first like before you dye it, it's more this ecru color, so not quite white, but very close. But BFL is almost like a light buttery color. So just that difference in the base, the yarn itself can create quite a different look between the skeins. So that's amazing. And all superwash is going to be a little more intense than like a non-superwash because that process of making it superwash makes the scales on the wool lay down. And so then one that makes it softer, but then the light kind of reflects, not refract. I don't know. This is getting into stuff I don't totally know, but like the light just it's brighter. Let's just put it that way than it is if it's 100% wool. But it's a lovely, lovely fiber, and if you haven't tried it, I absolutely recommend it. I made a really simple cowl last year. I think it was for H&H to have a sample there in the BFL fingering, and the stitch definition is incredible because again, merino's really soft, so you don't get that really clear stitch definition. So BFL would be amazing in lace, cables, anything where you really want the stitches to shine.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that before. I think, yeah, because the merino, a lot of times to get stitch definition, they do that. They make that really round yarn,
Yeah.
and and superwash tends to be more of that rounder yarn. But you're right, it is because it is soft. It would flatten pretty easily, and the BFL is just has more character.
Yeah.
It's just
And I get like most people are, thankfully, more people are asking for non superwash and things other than merino. But, my largest line is in the sock base. But you're one of the stores that definitely like looks at the sock colors and said, yeah, but can you put it on this base or this base? And so I'm really delighted that people are kind of branching away from the superwash and just merino to like look at these other breeds of yarn or compositions because there's so much out there.
yeah. Yeah, and I think like superwash is the gateway for people who like were shopping at Joann's, or they were
Mm,
getting their yarn with acrylic based in them, and easy care and whatever. And then we kind of say, oh yeah, but try the superwash wool, and try and get them in there. And then once they adjust to that and realize that it's not going to kill anybody to actually hand wash your stuff, then
mm,
they're like, oh, well, show me some non-superwash,
yeah.
because it just has different character. And I think generally it's more durable, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so. It tends to pill less than merino would. So like merino is great for a shawl because you're not getting that friction of wear like you would with a sweater. But and I've made sweaters in merino because like people were wanting to do stuff, so I had samples. But like you get that fuzz and halo, and I have I have a sweater in my DKBFL, and then also I double stranded it with silk merino, or sorry, silk mohair. And my gosh, I've had that sweater for probably 4 years now, and it's a tank. Like it's more the merino that gets like pilly, or not the merino, sorry, the mohair. So I like kind of shave off the clumps of the mohair every now and again, but it's an incredible sweater. So, and
Yeah,
I've worn it so many times, and the shape, it keeps its shape, and it hasn't grown, as we would say, with
right.
softer fibers.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Well, and I think it's fun too to learn. Um, there's a famous quote from Claire Parks who, and I will butcher this, but it's something to the effect of, what if they just called wine wine instead of,
Mm,
you can get a cab, or you can get a Chardonnay, or you can get a Merlot, or whatever. And um, she was comparing that to, we just call it wool.
yeah,
Well, yeah, it's wool, but merino is so different than BFL. That's different than Corriedale and Cormo, and it's just really fun to play with these different fibers and see what characteristics they have and what you like about one, and then from your standpoint, dyeing is takes it to a whole different level of,
right.
how is this going to take the diet? Because it was interesting in what you showed, because it almost seemed like the BFL was darker, but I
Hmm.
think that's because it's a light color and it's a darker base.
Yeah,
And in a lot of the
this is
colors,
the BFL. Yeah,
yeah, and a lot of the colors, maybe the darker colors, the merino is going to look more saturated, I think,
yes,
than the BFL. So yeah, but they're just, and your colors are gorgeous. So beautiful in sweaters and whatever
yeah.
you want to do. The other thing, we're getting out of this season, but for mittens, BFL is
Hmm. Oh
really,
yeah.
really good, because a merino mitten,
Oh gosh,
yeah, I mean, you're gonna,
it's not gonna make it.
no. You got it for a season, maybe two.
Yeah,
But
but don't go shovel the driveway or anything in them. This
mm-mm,
is just walk
no.
into the train or something. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and don't walk a dog because you don't want a leash in your hand. But yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So cool. I think that was it for my questions. Did you have anything else?
Well,
Um,
I wanted to share. I had a weaver come to the house. Carol Irving. She's on the other side of the UP. She does amazing pieces, but she does rug weaving, and she brought some of the wool she uses. And like another interesting thing as a dyer is that the smell of her wool, because I just dyed a few things so she could see what it was like, versus my wool was so, like, I don't know what breed it was that creates this rug wool. And so that was really interesting. And the other day I have a new yarn I'm going to be launching, and it is silk and yak. And then the smell of the silk and yak, so different from the BFL or the merino. And it's funny because sometimes my kids will come in, especially like in the spring when it's getting a little warmer and it's a little more humid, and they'll walk in and they'll be like, "Oh, the smell!" And I'm like, "That's the smell of money." So they've come to appreciate the smell of wet wool in this house.
well, thank you so much for taking this time and talking with us. And I'm sure everybody loves hearing the little behind the scenes of Keenan. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.